Okay, hello guys. I would like to thank you for being present in this space. It will be unfortunately centered around Kursk because of, well, it is the hottest topic right now. And I would like to, well, line up what we said from last time to today. I was supposed to do a Q&A on the Sunday, more or less. I didn't do it because I was waiting to be 100% sure what was going to say. And well, grosso modo, as we spoke last at the last space, Friday was a turning point in the sense that Ukrainians did exactly what we were expecting of them. They advanced the farthest possible. Then, well, backtracked a little bit. We've got tanks blown up pulling back from the maximum line. We got vehicles targeted by Lancet after being abandoned on the road. We got the counterattack in Martinovka. We got people in Snagost saying that Russians have taken back the place. And most importantly, today there was a discording news and disheartening news that 4 BTR force had been passed the curtain containment line, curtain line, whatever you want to call it, around the eastern part of the front, so eastern Suja, and about 13 kilometers from there, they had gone through with the BTR-4. Around the area of Giri. Most important part is that the said BTR might well be a captured BTR that is now confirmed being captured by the Russians. We don't know where exactly, but photos were posted by Ustroika. So there too, maybe as the Italians say, there is a lieto fine. So in this case, I will still regard that expansion, lateral expansion, because like that's what I actually said last time, that vertically they're going to stop advancing towards Kursk, Kurchatov, and so on. And they'll try to push on the sides to expand the line of control in order for them not to be caught by UMPKs, artillery, UAVs. So basically expand the line in order to be able to hide people in there. There is the contentious point of Suja. Ukrainians say they've captured it. Uh, Geolocations show that they haven't captured it. They are still in the process of completely clearing the town. Will it be a serious loss? Honestly, as I said, absolutely not. Will it be a reputational damage? The TG that I spoke about said they think that we are the worst, the Russians in this case, and there is no reputational damage to do anymore. So who the fuck cares? The reality that matters is the one on the ground. And unfortunately, that part seems to confirm my first analysis or first day without knowing anything extensive. And then the second analysis, a couple of days later, that we had during the space. Basically, Ukrainians try to push as far as possible, get as much possible land in order then to create crumple zones. These crumple zones are actually now crumbling because of the main issue of logistical lines. It is in many aspects exactly what the Russians did in Kharkov, with, and I already explained this, the huge difference that the Kharkov operation was supporting a offensive action in Donetsk, whereas the Kursk operation is attempting to relieve the defensive front in the Pokrovsk and Donetsk area generally. Now, what's going on more or less is that the current extent and holding of the Ukrainian forces should be around 200 220 square kilometers, which is a growth from the area that both Deep State and multiple other posters had initially lined out. It's very good for the Russians because right now it's roughly uh, I'd say less than 1% of the area from the Kursk Oblast. Kursk Oblast is roughly 30,000 kilometers. So 10%, 3,000, 1%, 300. A lot of people speak about 350, 720. This is bullshit. This might well have been the maximum push with the vehicles, but the reality is that those headways that were made, we saw multiple of those teams. It's one tank, couple of vehicles, and then usually they need to be RTB or have someone deliver to them fuel. One of such runs was attacked around Martinovka by the Chechens, and well, the images spoke from themselves. At least 3 victims on tape, 2 vehicles. One was a senator-based control vehicle. One Starlink was taken from that, and the other was a supply run. Basically, it was filled to the brim with a small caliber ammo and a couple of other things like diesel generators, diesel for diesel generators and shit like that. This means that in the area somewhere, these guys were either setting base, either there is someone that you need to filter out, which is a very good thing. Given that they don't have that, they will be forced to move from themselves. Some very weird things also happening. I had when we spoke last time, I was at between 23 and 27 different vehicles used for the offensive, and we're not speaking about civilian trash. We're really speaking about heavy vehicles, MRAPs, air defense, tanks, artillery, and so on. And now, with a couple of new additions, we are roughly at 32 to 33, depending if everything is transferred to the front. Notable additions are the Vincent RV, a weird operation of the BTR-4 already captured by the Russian forces. And of course, as I said, finally, BMP-1s are there, MTLBs are there, and more importantly, the peon. One peon was advanced. This peon actually completely finishes the uh, picture in terms of where the Ukrainians are standing now, and they are standing into a logic of bringing this heavy long-range artillery in order to defend the perimeter. One of the things that has disappeared though are FPVs. I don't know if you remember, guys, but initially the FPVs were used to reach way behind the contact line, trying to shut down helicopters. One Mil 28N was damaged by the rotors. It landed and the guys were repairing it. Another Mi 8 MTS was attempted to be shot down. It was, of course, rejected by the airflow. In both cases, the airflow did its job. And then, if you look it properly, there are no more FPV attacks. This might have to do with what I already surmised, that the Ukrainians, this was within the group, by the way, something I call cover 2. All the covers are, in my logic, I expanded in 4 categories. Cover 1 is general line immobile electronic warfare against drones. So basically, it's going to be the platoons, the Shkvals, all this shit. Then you gotta have the cover 2, which is mobile EV. Russians had a fuck ton of them because they need to move forward, and now those mobile EVs have been making their operation on Ukrainian vehicles as well. Now, the thing with this is that I do not know how effective they are, but one thing that's true is that on the front line, there are almost no FPVs visible. Even the attacks from the Ukrainians after the first and second day now are done primarily with the old way of flying a Mavic not far away and then dropping artillery on it, mortars, whatever. FPVs since date 1 and 2 are extremely limited or non-existing on both sides. So this means that either the Ukrainians' electronic warfare is a blunt one, a bit like the Russians in the early stages of Avdiivka, or the speed, the pace of movement, and the best extents, let's say it like this, of the Ukrainian troops just cannot allow the FPV troops to follow them because it puts them in harm's way. One thing that has been, however, omnipresent, of course not as much as we would like, is the Lancet. The meme PV is there. The meme PV of this war, which has saved numerous helicopters, planes, and artillery guns on the Russian side, is wreaking havoc. It is blunting the most advanced positions of the Ukrainian forces. It is hunting light armor, and most importantly, is doing exactly what I thought that the actual Lancet should be doing in this kind of uh, environments, which is following the Ukrainians for as long as it's needed, and then taking them out once they stop. So basically, when they're spreading up and trying to take ground and hold ground. The most beautiful image from it is that the Ukrainians posted a martyr passing by a captured or destroyed D-30 122 millimeter gun howitzer, and we have the video of that encounter on both sides. We see the martyr going from the Ukrainian point of view to the ground, going up the trees, and then we have the Lancet point of view that hits that exact martyr and basically takes it out. This war is absolutely crazy in that aspect. Is that on both sides, when the lines are extremely fluid and there is little information control, because despite what the Ukrainians are saying, the information control from them has been released from day 1, 2, and 3. They are trying to show something, in my opinion, because they are feeling that the PR battle is completely turning upside down. And it is not turning because they're losing the battle per se. The battle, in my opinion, was already lost when they launched the operation. Because for me, if you want to launch that kind of operation, then the front needs to be a lot wider. I posted already two comparisons. The front uh, so far in the Kursk Oblast is about 75 kilometers linear, while the front in the Kharkov Oblast from the Russian foray in May is about 70 kilometers. So basically, they're almost comparable. And they also are using the same logic when it comes to the staging and the concealment. There is, unfortunately, in Sumi, I've always spoken about this, I also posted them up, a huge forest canopy all over that border, all those 75 kilometers, that's flanked by a highway. And actually, it's a very good road that you can use to basically ferry your troops there by road and then let them bivouac in the forest, wait until the staging point is ready, the troops are ready, and then you can move into Kursk Oblast. That, of course, would need deforestation, incineration, but I always spoke about that in the previous space. The same thing exists, albeit on a lower degree, around the same areas where the Russians attacked. So there too, I mean, both sides have this problem with the concealment for at least a couple of days. So basically, the surprise element is still available tactically on both sides. Now, where do we go from here? Well, for as much as we can see, the Ukrainian forces are not pushing north anymore, and they are still busy trying to reinforce as much as they can, as I said, within the crumpled zones. I expect something very important to happen. Initially, I thought that the Ukrainians will fire control Suja and then would spread around it and then take the city would be a lot more logical now that they will have more troops that would come in reinforcements to engage in these city battles. And also, while we don't know how many Russians are still in the city, even 30, 40, 50 would be a nice hole for their so-called replenishment fund. So it would be one of the last victories of this incursion as we speak. Therefore, in a tactical sense, when the PR is regarded, taking Suja last after all the reinforcements are there is nice. However, the problem with um, this option is that you are delaying the major staging point from the second step of the plan that we're seeing. A second step is basically you are going to get fucking grounded. And there was an article, I think yesterday, I posted the first paragraph when basically the guy said that we did 3 rounds. Uh, within the Russian territory. And the third night, what we got is a UMPK in the face. We lost 12 people, and he himself was wounded. So a very nice 13 casualty count as minimum from one UMPK. I already explained that even the UMPKs kill one person and wound two per count, given the extremely high number of UMPKs that are being launched every day. You are at a very high count of killed and wounded, so casualty count from the UMPK. But here we have a quote unquote lucky strike, which means that you can understand the power of this bomb compared to the FPVs. Um, and therefore, this attrition that is going to start setting in is going to force the Ukrainians to think exactly the way the Russians are thinking right now for Kharkov. Do you really need it? And there goes the whole conundrum of this operation. A lot of people on the Ukrainian side are absolutely saying that this is a very nice, smart move so you can hold ground and change it. I already explained this from the day one. Right now, you control maybe 0.5%. Let's give you 1% of the Kursk Oblast, while the Russians control about 0.5% of the Kharkov Oblast on the Volchansk Gluboke axis, on top of the rest of the Kharkov Oblast they control from the east. So roughly 3 to 4 to 5% if you want to be generous, but 3%. So what is Putin going to do? You think he's going to exchange that 1% of Kursk Oblast with Donetsk as a whole? No, of course not. No, what's going to happen, and I explained this, is that Putin and the Russians are going to be extremely happy to have Ukrainians do a crinky, quote unquote, on steroids. Unfortunately, this one has been copyrighted, but apparently nobody is trying to respect this copyright. So have fun with it, guys. So if they want to do a crinky on steroids by bringing everybody to sue me, then you are going to literally doom the exact point that you want to make. If your change plate, if your staging point, if your hub is Sumi, then the Russians are just gonna fucking start drop bombs in Sumi. Um, it's not what you're doing with the Russians when you start sending Atacams and you pretend that those are drones in Morozovsk or in Lipetsk. No, what's happening here, and this is the biggest problem I'm having, what's happening here is that you are getting bombed in another place to your territory, a place which was peaceful mostly, and which would have helped you if the war turned sour for the Russians to actually stage the kind of operation you're doing right now and overwhelm them. But what you are doing right now, you are basically burning the candle by both sides. You are putting troops in the Kursk Oblast with a dangerous logistical chain, and you are not putting these troops in Donetsk. So at some point, and given the advancement that the Russians are still having in Donetsk, what you're at best hoping to get is that they stop in Pokrovsk, but then the troops that you have in Kursk need to be moved out and brought back where? You got it. In Pokrovsk. So the only thing you're doing is just you're killing guys in Kursk while they're killing you in Pokrovsk. Now you're hoping that operation is going to stop that happening from Pokrovsk. And then that you're going to move those troops back to Pokrovsk to do what? Counterattack? Defend? What? This cat and mouse game makes no sense with the current holdings. So either this operation is going to aim at Kurchatov, going to aim at, I don't know, 15, 20, 30% of Kursk Oblast, which would require, and this is one of the things I've discussed for Kharkov, it would require a second troop army. And this second troop army is not 20,000, 30,000, 40,000. You would need 100, 150,000 people. Because right now you got stopped by road about 70 kilometers from Kurchatov and about 90 kilometers from Kursk, fine. It's fine. Because the point that you're trying to make for the Russians is not the one that the Russians understand. The Russians are understanding that you are trying to pop up all these elements of surprise over the border because, unfortunately, their tactic is a lightly defended border, given they have all these uh, strategical depth, which allows them, in this case, to let you come for as far as possible and run out of everything. Which is exactly what's happening in Kursk. Within 20, 30 kilometers, these people could not go further. So what they do, okay, we establish that point line, then we go back and start to defend with the hills on our backs. And it's true, it's fine. That's exactly what Volchansk is about. Russians in Volchansk made I'd say, a bigger blunder in the sense that they didn't try to bypass as fast as possible from the area lateral of the city, and now they are stuck basically duking it out for a city that both sides have completely destroyed. And this is one of the things that I'm going to repeat once again. The Ukrainians have no qualm of destroying their own cities if it allows them to stop the Russians. Of course, it's absolutely vile in the sense that this means that that city is done. Even if you try to control it, it's raised. It's about like Klishivka, that Krinky, that everything. In every single time, it's a Ukrainian city. If you think as Ukrainians that is gone, it's not a Russian city. Volchansk, the Russians do not have a claim over Kharkov right now. They should, but they didn't put it out. We can discuss about Krinky, which is part of the Kherson Oblast, and that too. Okay, it's bad, but it's a small village. Let's raise the Ukrainians out of it, and it worked for the Ukrainians, despite everything that it spoke about attrition and shit. Nothing happened there. They didn't push through. No, they completely switched the board and went up north. And of course, there's an understanding why they did it. Probably because they knew the border was not well guarded enough. So far, it's very telling that the captured vehicles on the Russian side are two T-80 BVs and two other were destroyed. So the whole border area was defended by two tanks and two other in reserves. It's hilariously bad. But at the same time, given where the Ukrainians are right now and the losses they themselves have incurred, which is in this case at least 7 to 8 tanks, plus a flurry of other vehicles, about 30 something of them, doesn't make it really that worth. I don't understand why people are getting mad about a very simple situation. If you start to make this backlog discussion again and make that account, just head to Oryx. Oryx for this year for Ukraine had something like 170 tanks lost in 6 months or something. So basically about one per day, more or less. You are losing one per day, proven on tape, in the 6 or 7 days of operation that you're ongoing in Kursk. Plus what you're losing elsewhere, like you lost an Abrams in Pokrovsk, there's another shitty tank you lost in Gorlovka. So what the Ukrainians are doing by the numbers, if you go to Oryx, is accelerating their own attrition. And the earnings that are getting them there are not something that, like for the Russians, whatever they're losing Kharkov or whatever, is amplifying the effect of their push in Pokrovsk. Ukrainians in Kursk are not having that direct impact in Pokrovsk. And on the other side, the Russians are, in a certain sense, because the Ukrainians went to attack them in Russia, can employ conscripts. It's not fun. It's politically extremely heavy for Putin to do that. But it's homeland. And I can barely see the Mothers Committee in Russia try to say to Putin, "Oh, you shouldn't send conscripts to defend our own land." Nobody's gonna say that. This is not Chechnya. Kursk is not Grozny. And the problem by that logic, so let's say that there is a part of the Russian society, the usual liberals and faggots, that is going to go and say, oh, we should seek peace, and you cannot do that right now in Russia as it stands, because the Ukrainians themselves have burned those bridges. POW treatment, the glee of invading Russia, and people are gonna say, yeah, but that's what Russians did, and I'm fine with that. The whole point was that Ukrainians were not like Russians. But now, what they are showing, the reaction, the chip on the shoulder when it comes to that, is putting them at the same level. And people's gonna say, "Oh, you cannot do both sides." I can do it both sides because that's what the Ukrainians are saying themselves. Even the analysis and the reports that are going out of the Western press, you can hear allegedly Ukrainian couples saying, "Oh, if they can invade us, why cannot they invade them?" This change in the Ukrainian mentality is going to happen to the Russians themselves. A lot of the Russian society is true. I had a discussion with a friend who said, "Oh, I don't see why the Russians do not attack the Ukrainians." I'm saying because it didn't happen in Ukraine as well. The early days. In the early days, the attacks that were happening were done by the Teroboron. That Teroboron in Russia, unfortunately, doesn't exist. The logic of the normal citizen resisting is not there. You can see the Russians are occupying over 10% extra of the Ukrainian territory. The partisan movement there, if you compare it to anything else like the Taliban or the attacks on into the Syrian governmental strongholds within the 3, 4, 5 first years of the civil war, or the exterior aggression, call it as you want, where night and day, most of the attacks against officials are as SBU plans. You are into a completely different paradigm here. And for the lot of the bullshit that was made about how the partisan movement on Ukrainian occupied land was going to sap the Russian, it's not true. Most of the people there, they just want to keep going and live their lives. If they can do something to, harm the Russians without being utterly exposed, probably they think about it. But we're not seeing anybody doing police station runs. In fact, most of the police stations are still run majorly by people that were there under the Ukrainian rule, from those who didn't move out, of course. So the logic that I'm having here with the Ukrainian operation in Kursk is that they were also working with the assumption that they would move a lot faster than what they did, so they would, not be able to start having these logistical run-ins that we were seeing right now. This also has to do with, as I said again on the first thread, they chose a good area to advance fast for at least, to show results, but they would hit the heights pretty fast and some choke points pretty fast as well. And you can see it in Koronevo, they got fucked. Martinovka, they got fucked. When they tried to get to the heights in Kruglovo, well, Lancet did its job. So you can see that the real area when they could do damage and expand was the low ground. It was the whole Suja field, the Suja area, and that's what they're gonna go for now. They're gonna stabilize the area around Suja, and they're gonna probably turn Suja into rubble by staying there, and Russian aviation by absolutely obliterating the place. And this is one of the things that I'm hearing from Russian mill bloggers, commentators on, oh, it would cost us some reserves and damage into property and infrastructure. And I'm like, are you guys insane? Since when are you starting to discuss about damage to property when you don't own it anymore? The Ukrainians are going to completely control the city. And they're not going to be nice and accept that the whole fucking maneuver has failed and go home. Because politically, you cannot explain it. It wasn't a show of force. They're still losing cities, villages, and shit in Donetsk. So at that point, it makes no sense to start telling to everybody, "Oh, mission accomplished. We're going home." But staying, and this is one of the things I said before. Once they start to get fixated, well, mashallah, we're gonna have kurban, and that's exactly what I want. To me, honestly, given where they put themselves, the best solution was to keep them feeding this front, keep them eating fabs, if possible, bring some patriots around the area so we can even hand those assholes, and it's fine. There are, of course, this problem. This problem. Hello, guys. Okay, you're gonna have this problem, and this problem is that the main approach to the war itself on your border with Ukraine, given the absolutely humongous length. I mean, it's the same length as with Finland. We're speaking about 1,300 kilometers. In order to have this border completely manned to a acceptable level, which would be a concentration of about 100 people per square kilometer, you would need about 100,000 people to fucking cover the whole area. 130,000 to be more or less correct. Nobody's gonna do it at this point. It's not about manpower shortages. It's simply not economical because you're gonna have 130,000 people eating food, staying up front, and also taking off supplies that you need to attack in Donetsk. So the calculus from the Ukrainian side was actually correct. The border cannot be manned fully because, first of all, you have a war ongoing in the east, but on the same time, for the Ukrainians, it's the same problem. You are a war going to east, and you also need to be sure that what you just did in Kursk and what they just did to you in Kharkov is not going to happen somewhere else. And that problem there was compounded by a lot of dysfunction and a lot of laissez-faire on the Russian side, which happens like so often that it's a feature. It's not even like a fuck up now. But at the same time, there is this cynical calculus, and I said it already, that in a lot of these areas when the Russians are undermanned or thinly protected, you got the nature, you got the topography that takes over, and that's how the Russians have always defended themselves. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, when the action is small, they can cover it pretty fast. We had the raid in Voron, we had the raid in Tetkino, and so forth. So when it's a couple of 100 guys, it's easy peasy. They can fly some shit in there. They can hit with artillery. Helicopters are gonna make mincemeat of it. But here we are looking at something way bigger, and that's something I already made the calculus. It could be between 7,500 to 10,000 people all over that small 70 kilometers line. You need to find where these assholes are, and also you need to disrupt their logistics. And that has nothing to do with all that loop that a lot of NAFWIDs are speaking. Your problem right now, the first thing that Russians need to do is not repelling the Ukrainian advances. No, the first thing you need to do is to identify how they're supplying. Are they supplying themselves? And in this case, the moment I think the Russians notice that, oh, these guys are fully organic, there is no log line here. Then they understood the point and they sent, plug the holes. And once that was done, then suddenly the whole discourse changed on the Ukrainian side. Then they started publishing shit by saying where they were, how far they were. The PR machine started going in overdrive. And the PR machine is so bad right now that we have exchanges from 2023 being shown as hostages and POWs from today. We have the attempt to show Russian losses. We had the two T-70, 280 BVMs that were destroyed by, I still think, not FPVs but HIMARS. We have, of course, the loss of the column, and we have the capture of one or two T-80s. And we are seeing a couple of scenes with Russians that probably were ambushed trying to get out of Dodge. And it's great. For the Ukrainians right now, you're going to have this milking of the situation. People are going to go to Suja, people are going to go to smaller villages, pull out the flags, start making these TikToks. And it's nice. Honestly, for the Ukrainian PR game, this is nice. But once you go there, you already know that they are not pushing forward. And it makes it so much more complicated then to start to understand why they're doing it. This is like being at the let's say a halftime, and you are 2-2, and showing the reels from the first 5 minutes when you scored 2 goals back to back. And of course, this is going to carry them to the next step, which is going to be, and thank God we got TikTokers on the other side. But for once, they did it pretty well, because I think, unbeknownst to them, they gave the indications that I was looking for. I was sure about it, but you need to have the evidence. First of all, Ukrainians are doing log runs with their own vehicles. There is no dedicated transport. I thought that the Humvees would do that, but we see very little pickup Humvees. And most important part, you can see that they're using com vehicles for that. Something that, in my opinion, should never be used for that, unless you don't have anything else, of course. So where we go from here, we are going to see two things. As I said last time, they're going to try and expand laterally, and today I was a bit afraid by seeing this advanced 13 kilometer eastwards. But then we had the pictures from Rustroika, and then I was like, maybe it's a lot more complicated than these guys just roaming around. On top of it, even the screenshot taken that was proving that they went around, literally was speaking about 4 isolated BTR force. And this, in my opinion, makes it fake. That screenshot could be true, could be fake, but to me it makes no sense to send these 4 BTRs in 4 different directions and then ending up with what we are seeing, which is one got completely bingo on fuel or was hidden somewhere, and then the Russians went and like, hello guys, this is ours now. And then what? Because this is the other thing. Is this maneuver, my Albanian friend asked me today, is it a bluff? And don't they have any reserves or what? And I'm saying, this is a bluff. Per se, it is a bluff, because, with the forces at hand, they were not going to go far. I mean, even Suja, in the sense that they're taking 5 days after masterfully isolating it, is a problem on itself, you know? Then what? Are they gonna just occupy and like? To me, this would make sense if it happens in multiple areas and they take these small cities like Suja, Glushkova, and stuff like that, and then they turn it into a basically Volchansk, bis, tris, quatuor, and so on. This is my problem. It's not happening. Okay, in Koltakino this morning were battles. We'll see where that leads. But once again, this is just up this line. You don't have an attack in Chernigov. You don't have an attack in Shostka. So everything stays within this forest canopy with this highway, and of course indicates that Yunakivka needs to go, Sumy needs to go, Khotin needs to go. All these axes of smaller or larger cities, they just need to go. It doesn't make any sense to try and not bomb these places. And people are gonna say, yeah, but for what? That's the thing. You're not gonna bomb them for a particular military reason. You are going to bomb them for a strategic reason in the context, which means that area needs to be evacuated from people. That area needs to be blown to smithereens in order for it to be impossible to use. The presence of enemy ISR, so basically having Zalas flying over Sumy 24/7, makes it that much more complicated for Ukrainians to use it as staging point. If you add UMPKs on the area, so basically you destroy a lot of storage space and also you kill civilians because you're not going to always hit military, adds to the fucking effect in this case. And this effect is that you will have to pay for invading Russia. We are not going to kick you right away, but we are going to kill your people. You have to understand this war not in terms of some kind of state of the art. You have to understand this war, as I said before, on a much more visceral aspect. And this thing will go on like this. I promised you it would get worse for the Ukrainians, and it will get worse. It already got worse, but the point here is that you need to make sure that you do actions, in this case, taking out storage spaces, taking out roads, making sure that they cannot use the highway on the area. All this shit, all this shit needs to be. Hear me, guys? Please, if you can hear me, just put the finger up, please. Can you hear me? Okay, fine, you can hear me. So basically, as I said, it has to be a retribution. Of course, it's horrible what I'm saying, and I'm not trying to hide it or try to weasel out. But it is what it is. You are using infrastructure, civilian, military, administrative. Well, it doesn't matter. You are using that as a staging point. It's costing you nothing to do it. And this is the whole point. It has to cost you something. If it doesn't cost you, it's free. If the Russians don't take action into that, you can keep going with it. So the whole point now is to fixate Khotin. Start with Khotin, ruin the city, make all the civilians go away in a way or another, either up in the sky, either with the luggage through the roads, and then take on Yunakivka. The problem with Khotin and Yunakivka is that they're not going to be the points of insertion that you're looking for. But they're going to be points where the Ukrainian army will have to evacuate people from, in a way or another. Sumy is even worse, but for right now, Sumy is not that much of a problem. You can take out the adjacent areas to the forest, and then you can try and find out where the logistics are organized. Unfortunately, as I said, the logistics that get out of the canopy right at the border are going to be a lot more complicated to hit. To see, maybe a little easier, but to hit, it would require incendiary first, a lot of cluster ammunition. The problem with the cluster ammunition into a densely forested area is that you first need to blow a lot of surface with, well, either ODABs or normal UMPKs, and then hit them with cluster, so the dispersal is still optimal, or at least good enough. If you throw these clusters all over the area, well, the only thing you're gonna do is just produce a lot of shards for the Ukrainians. That can be unpleasant, but not as effective as basically raising the shit out of them. And the most important part, of course, the incendiary part. If the Russians could at least free a band of 1 to 2 kilometers right at the border by basically burning the shit out of it, it would already change the calculus of the Ukrainian logistics a lot more. And then you need to, well, as I said, I'm going to repeat it. You need to bring your FPVs. Right now, the problem is, and I'm going to post the pictures for you guys. Right now, the problem that we're seeing is the following: is that there is the cover two available for the Ukrainians. It's not funny, and I honestly, uh, I was expecting this a lot earlier, but you know, the Ukrainians have the problems that they have. So I just posted a picture of the visible EV system. I think that system is also disrupting their own drones. So by not being there and not having any target within the close range of a couple of kilometers up to 10, they cannot actually fight this war. And the other problem is that for a lot of the talk about FPVs hunting Zalas and shit, well, Zalas are still flying and they're allowing Lancets to do exactly what the Ukrainian FPVs cannot do for the moment. And that is take over the fight out of the Ukrainian advanced groups, bog them down, destroy them, and force them to go back by feet. Going back by feet means that these stragglers are unsupported, they're stranded, they need to cross lines, and sometimes it happens that, you hear some throat singing and, things happen. Um, Now, the biggest problem that we're having is, for the love of God, if this was supposed to have a direct impact on Pokrovsk, it's not. Like, it's becoming so much more stupid now that the Russians not only are not slowing down in Pokrovsk, but they are taking over areas that were not supposed to take over. They are already in Toretsk. And this was the biggest surprise in my part, because I thought that by having that, the troops that are defending Toretsk for the moment were going to be extremely, extremely strong. They were going to have this absolute buffer of energy, and suddenly they're gonna do these counterattacks, including the one we saw from 53rd that allegedly took out the flag over the middle school in New York, only for it to be abandoned a couple of days or even hours later. But it was also visible on their own footage because they left the school and directly went northeastward, so basically behind the line. Once again, the PR level of the Ukrainian army is very high, and they're very good at this. But sometimes they're also very sloppy. So I'm posting, as I said, one of the maps that are pretty. Guys, can you hear me? Please, can you react if you can hear me or not? Can you hear me? Can you not hear me? Okay, you can hear me fine. Then, already another post. As I said, this thing should not have happened. So basically, the advancement towards Toretsk itself, according, of course, to Deep State, should not have happened. And this creates the following narrative. And the narrative is that uh, if your Kursk maneuver is not bringing um, the desired outcome on the other parts of the front, what is it good for? Because you are going to tell me that you're going to put at least one full brigade to capture exactly what the Russians did in Kharkov. It, in my opinion, once again, makes absolutely no sense. And then when you see them reinforce them with longer range artillery, which would indicate that the artillery they had in the beginning, so one Gvozdika, at least one crab, something that was shown as well, as I said, they were showing a crab loading a M3A1 number 4 charge, which is limited to 7 kilometers. That's so that the extra oomph they needed to reach beyond Suja wasn't there. And then, of course, we saw the Gvod being about laterally to Suja up to 10 kilometers within the front. So therefore, hitting longer range, they couldn't do it as well. They were forced to come extremely close, and so risk a destruction. At least the Gwozdika was targeted. It was inconclusive, but it shows that the ISR once again was playing a major role into thwarting much more important freedom of operation on the Ukrainian side. So what's the deal with this? And I already explained. I think the deal, and I would take again the that thread that I posted from a Finnish guy. These guys just know that the strategic calculus down the road, and we're not gonna discuss about the American elections because that will not change my opinion much. Trump is an idiot on these things and a flip flopper. So whatever he's trying to do, despite GD Vance and all this shit, the importance in this matter for the military industrial complex is far more interesting than because at the end of the day, the Americans have spent peanuts in the greater scheme of things. The real cost is being borne by Europe and Ukraine, but mostly Europe, and also the Russian Boogaloo threat has been offset because the Europeans have been passing orders to America. The F-35 market has completely gone bonkers. People have literally mortgaged multiple budgets for that shit. So the American advantage in being the top dog in NATO, both in production and the military means, shows that they don't give a fuck who is winning or losing in Ukraine. What they give a fuck, it's true, is that it ends. That the Ukrainians end up in fucking Moscow and sign a capitulation or not, it's not that important if the strategic outcome of it, which is a weakening of Russia and the further problems for the Russians to actually hold on this both war type economy, but also in their own ecosystem, environmental ecosystem, with regard to China, to Turkey, and so on. However, we should not overestimate that aspect. As I said, let's put the Americans aside. The reality is for the Ukrainians and for nobody else that so far no one has tried to intervene. Like we got yapping from the polls about trying to use jets and shit to intercept Shahids. Never happened. A lot of people are, especially the Baltic Chihuahuas, are talking about we absolutely need to intervene or be ready to shed our blood in Ukraine because otherwise we're gonna have to shed it in our homes. And I'm like, this is retarded. No Frenchman is going to fight in Ukraine to save Ukraine. Not because they're cowards or anything. No, it's because there is no logic on it. The demands that were leveled in 2022 from the Russians, which were extremely meek, that was absolutely hilariously bad. If the Ukrainians were smart enough to go beyond this bullshit that was put in their head by someone else that fight because you're going to prevail, would have been an absolute own goal for the Russians and an absolute defeat in the greater scheme of things. Because, of course, if that thing would have stopped in March, the losses on the Russian side would have been catastrophic for a short stint, but nowhere near where they are right now. And I'm saying this as probably the most iron fucking blooded Zigro here. And I think it was obvious the moment when the Kursk debacle happened, when almost everybody had lost their mind and were looking at the fucking tape. But I'm the first to say, had it been stopped then, given what we allegedly know by the Western press, it would have been a defeat. Although legally it would have forced Ukraine to relinquish territory, have a smaller army, whatever you want. It would still have been a strategic defeat for a tactical victory. Because none of the requests, except for the NATO part, would have been conclusive. For the Ukrainians signed Minsk, they never fucking abode by it. They would have signed that shit, would have accepted Crimea for the time being, and within 5 to 10 years, guys, can you hear me? Because like I'm not very sure if it's working or not. Um, Within 5 to 10 years, we would have a war of a completely different caliber, because probably the F-16 saga that we had for over almost 2 years and a half would have happened overnight in 2022. They would have like, okay, you know what? Some bumfuck company like Drakon would have sold those F-16s to Ukraine, and oh, nothing happened there. You know, like they're demilitarized, or worse, F-15s, F-18s, whatever you just fucking call it. On top of it, the army that the Russians wanted from the Ukrainians would have not, stopped them from actually completely changing their fleet. So basically, the 150 jets that they had, that were all Soviet junk, to the trash, second-hand NATO shit, and that would have been an entry gate for that. So by 2022, that would have been a defeat dressed as a victory. In 2024, we are looking at a victory that Ukrainians want to dress up as a defeat for the Russians. And I understand. I mean, if you look at it from this singular point, that, oh my God, we're year 3 of this war and Ukrainians are invading Russia, it looks hilariously bad. But that's the first rule when you go to war. You just discard shame. Going to war is already being shameless. Going to war, and doesn't mean, I'm not speaking about some kind of bullshit resistance war, but going to war individually means that you are going there to kill someone for whatever reason in an organized fashion. Humanly, you cannot pretend, you're not shameless, because it affects the whole self-preservation principle. You put yourself in harm's way with the hope that you're going to be the one doing the harm. So both philosophically and ethically, going to war is already being shameless. And therefore, it entails losses, it entails catastrophes, it entails very, very, very shameful situations, being captured, fucking up and being beaten by a smaller enemy or a less prepared enemy. It entails hubris, it entails a lot of aspects. The whole gamut of human occurrences are in a war, compacted and blown up. So the moment you try to be like, anything else but driven by your objective, which would make you shameless, unethical, violent, aggressive, your place is not at the war. And therefore, everybody was like laughing about how the Russians, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, who the fuck cares? Look at the fucking scoreboard. That's the most important. It doesn't matter how much of a fucking tier 1 operator you are. If you go to fucking Kinburn Spit and get raped by some tidbit wearing Yeezys, is that shameful? No, you're just dead. We are gonna laugh with your ass, which is, disrespectful, but there is no shame into what you just did. Of course, there's shame to be given orders by Buddha Nigger, but that's unfortunately the country you were born in, and that's what you chose. And it was also shameful sometimes to get orders by Pigroshid, but unfortunately that was also part of the game. The whole point here, what I'm trying to convey, is that for a lot of the high profile, high PR moves that Ukrainians try to absolutely press to the Russians' throat, You need to understand that it doesn't matter in the greater scheme of things. Had we been speaking about half the Kursk Oblast, I would have told you this is fucked up. We are speaking about less than 1% of that thing that's really held, and we are speaking about guys wasting equipment, bungling up like every single different equipment that got received from everywhere to miserably fail to capture Suja the seventh day after keeping it in a fire control situation for now, I think already the first day. Remember, a lot of people mocked the Russians in Mariupol, which is a 500,000 fucking city, defended by absolute trash of the society within a month. Here we have the Ukrainians not daring to get inside a 5,000 people city after fucking 7 days. And there are no people living there, or at least very few, maybe 100 guys defending the city, 200 tops. They have no tanks, there is no artillery to help them. Maybe it's gonna come some Lancets, but the city is good as lost. Where's the victory in that? Where is your objective into that? And I know people are gonna say, yeah, but the Russians 8 months for this and that, and I agree. But the Russians have it 8 months from now. We don't know if the Ukrainians are gonna have it in a month from now. However, the current phase literally goes to what I said, that if people thought that this would be over on the Russian side in 2 weeks, it could still happen because we only week one, but I really doubt it, especially the way the Ukrainians are left to build up around the limits that they've set themselves, and also the moment they get Suja, it would mean a city battle, and of course it could be going very fast due to the nature of the city itself, but it will still take at least 1 or 2 months to completely erase the traces of the Ukrainian presence in the area. And if you don't believe me, take as template what's happening in Kharkov. We are at month 3, and the Russians are still there. They're still holding a fucking tiny village of Gliboke, despite at least 100 people thrown to capture it and 7 vehicles. That's how bad it is. So if you want to gloat, don't. It's a foregone conclusion. For as long as the Ukrainians don't do anything stupid, we would like that they did something stupid, which is like, regroup and try another push up north, up the hills, because then we would honestly gloat about the stupidity. But Ukrainians are not going to do that. What they're going to try is, as I said, try to expand all over the hilly area, so they would have the control of the heights and then expand along the heights. But as it stands right now, I'm like, the game is lost. Whatever game there was, there would have been the first or second day. First, second day, if you are in Kurchatov, then you can try and play some kind of blackmailing over that stuff. But it would have required a lot more forces. It would have required a logistical system to sustain that, not for them to be fully organic, because otherwise you end up exactly as the Russians ended up in 2022. And most importantly, it would have required air cover. And despite the bullshit that was given by FT about a Ukrainian jet buzzing overhead in Kursk, that's not true. The jets that we've seen over Suja and Kursk were Sukhoi 25s of the Russian military. And it was the very fucking first day. You remember, jets went through and the truck had been burned on the highway that would further go towards the MiG monument, which was bypassed yesterday, probably by the Ukrainians. They published the video today. So, generally speaking, this second phase is the most important part for the Ukrainians. And that, as I said, is either we dig in and we take a lick, either we are trying to play mobile within the area that we have one last time, try and not seize the opportunity, but make sure that the Russians are not resting. Because once the Russians are going to fucking settle those lines, it's just going to be exactly what's happening in Volchansk. The problem is that Volchansk is a 20,000 uh, strong city, was a 20,000 strong city. This is a 5 to 6,000. And you are in flat over three parts, so they literally can go from Korenovo, Malaya Lokna, um, Martinovka, and they're just gonna rain fucking shit on you. And it doesn't even matter what you are trying to do, because your whole point defending Volchansk was that you can bring things from the back. Here, your only major staging point is gonna be Sumy, and Sumy is well within UMPK range. And if it's not, it's gonna be Iskander. And if it's not, they're gonna fucking bring those elusive Iranian ballistic missiles that are supposedly training with. So, if I was Ukrainians right now, I would try and pull back within 4 weeks in the best way possible, losing the least people possible. And whatever was prepared for this operation to be sustained, I would try another area just to make sure that this area moves out. Unfortunately, as I said, I'm very scared that whoever is dealing with this maneuver um, has seen or has read too many wearable books. Because, as I said, the way it is being operated, the groups that have been made, I hope this is not NATO uh, doctrine whatsoever, but these are mobile groups that the Kampfgruppe Pieper established for its attempted advance over the Meuse in Ardennes offensive. And what was hilarious was literally that tank moving downhill, one tank going up front, two armored vehicles, two light vehicles. It's literally, it was a four-way group like Pieper tried to do in 44. And the LARP, of course, from the Ukrainian side has never been hidden. I mean, these guys have Luftwaffe. There was what, Munashjungen or something like that. I mean, like they are. I really think that are doing what the Nazis couldn't do in 44, and it's fucking sad. It's fucking sad because it shows a brain rot, a romanticism of something that was failing from the beginning 80 years ago. It has, of course, we could say that it is like just how the military works. If you want a recon group, you're gonna have to do it like that, and I agree. But it's just too funny how they are trying the same shit that already failed back then. It's very funny to see that the optics for these people sometimes are absolutely trash, and they will still go for it. They will go for the lowest of the low, especially in the context of attacking Kursk from the southwest like someone else, and this time it's a Jewish president ordering that. Like, you can imagine the far right in Russia going full ecumenism with having Nazis under a Jewish president with American help attacking you on a hero city of the Russian Federation. The guy who thought this on the Ukrainian side had to be a fucking mentally impaired moron or Sirsky. But I'm scared it was just an impaired moron, called either Yermak or Zhidolensky. And this is how fucking bad it is. But what's worse is that someone had to, underwrite this check on the Western side. And it's true that the PR approach in here is extremely meek. Most of the guys gonna say, "Oh, we're not sure about what you're doing," but they have the right to do it. We don't hear triumphant proclamations. For 3 days, the Ukrainians wanted to see how it would pan out. And now that it has panned out, that okay, this is how far we're gonna go, they're gonna start milking it, and we've seen it. They moved around the same group of prisoners from the KPP, got some other guys from northwestern Suja, pulled them together, and you have pictures of them being just fucking bunched in a room somewhere at the border, and the same guys just put into a wall, and of course you got this humiliation logic going on, and we are going so far that they are pointing out that how some guy has a 2,300 euros sweater that is unfortunately fake, of course, by calling them TikTok, and I have no problem calling them TikTok battalion myself, the guys from Ahmad. Doesn't mean that they're not gonna fucking smash your mouth. I mean, Martinovka, we saw that what happened. The issue, though, is that once this circle of self patting in the back and self conning starts, you have to understand that you are not dealing with rational people anymore. And of course, you have to ignore the assholes on Twitter because that's their purpose. They are just astroturfing and doing PR of the lowest degree. But the people who are pushing for this, they know the real situation. They should know better, but they don't. They don't do it because the whole point of this operation is to try and have the West understand that the only way to beat Russia is them intervening or them completely letting go of whatever limitation they have. That asks another question. What weapons can you use to go as far as 6, 7, 800 kilometers on the Western arsenal? There aren't many. And one of those not many that the Americans can give means that you lose control over what the Ukrainians will do with it. The Ukrainians were not supposed to do some things. They did them anyway. So whoever's going to sign for that, let's say the name Jasmine Extended Range or Taurus or whatever, the Taurus will not go beyond 550 kilometers, just like the Scout EG. The problem is not there. The problem is that because of the plane needs to fly not too close to the border, you lose most of that range difference between that and Atacams. But Tomahawks, Jasmine ER, that's the problem. But at that point, as I said, first of all, giving Tomahawks is going to be a strategic changing gambit. And as I said, you cannot trust the Ukrainians to hit. What are you going to hit with that? On top of it, then you really have no more red lines for the Russians. You did everything. The only thing that's remaining is you intervening yourself when you're the Western partners, so to speak. So we are going there. That's what the Ukrainians want to do. If it succeeds somehow, fine. We did exactly what we wanted to do. If it fails, see, we tried everything. Only you can save us. And that's the danger. That's what I had a discussion with a friend. That Zelensky right now has admitted three things with his offensive in Kursk. He cannot do it in Donbass Donbass, for all purposes, is lost. You going for a open space in the enemy's armor in order for him not to kill you is literally saying, I cannot do what I'm supposed to do, which is defend myself. And people are going to say, yeah, but the best defense is the offense. Fine. But then I say you have this problem, and okay, you're going to stop them by having them divert troops in Kursk. What happens in Pokrovsk? With what troops are you going to do Pokrovsk then? The counteroffensive, whatever. You're not. You're just going to delay that shit. You're going to delay that hammer by trying to enter from the window because the door is closed, right? Fine. Well, that is giving up that you cannot have Donbass back. That militarily you cannot do it because the Russians are too entrenched, they are too well connected with Donetsk, the logistical lines, they are way too performant. And then you have the second point, and this is extremely scary. By giving it out that, okay, I cannot have Donetsk, but I'm going to do something else, or they're going to fucking stop doing that, you enter into a counter value situation. What do you think happens when you're trying to counter value it? Basically, when you go into this blackmail situation against a bigger guy, he's gonna fucking just blackmail you back. You are threatening his family, he's gonna kill your family. He's not gonna threaten you. And that's the problem. The problem is that whoever is designing this logic, remember that initially it was the attrition game is gonna help the Ukrainians win in 2024. And suddenly it's not the attrition, we got a limited offensive in order to have some kind of exchange during negotiations. And I'm like, wait a minute, you were supposed to attrite them to a point that will not attack you anymore. Now you're not attriting them, you are literally attriting yourself harder in a place where you yourself, you know, you cannot sustain the advance. So how does it make any sense? And the only way it makes sense, I'm going to repeat it, is if someone else has given you some kind of promise, tacit or otherwise, that if shit go really sideways, they're gonna intervene. So you are burning, as I said, the candle by both sides, by both ends, and hoping that somehow it would work. And in any case, if it doesn't work and you get fucked, then someone's gonna come, the cavalry is gonna arrive. I really doubt that's gonna happen, given the way things are going. Remember, the help was supposed to stop the Russians in Pokrovsk. It didn't. In fact, the Russians even opened a little bit more advances in the Kupiansk area as well. And you had Kharkov, and Kharkov is not going away either. You don't have the Russians going away from Volchansk. Glibok is still occupied. The heights over Volchansk are still in Russian hands. So that thing hasn't changed. Therefore, point 3, if one, the admittance that you cannot do it in Donetsk anymore, then 2, that there is a threat of a bigger game behind this, and you're just, you know, just gambling your well-being into the hands of some other prophetic savior. The third point is that who is really in charge in Kiev? And what's the mental capacity of these people? That's the biggest problem we have right now. If these guys have lost the plot, or they have this, they know that the war in Donbass itself is lost, and the only answer is opening another front with less means to mimic what the Russians did in Kharkov, or God forbid, what the Russians did in 2022, then you have a problem. Because up to now, as I said, you were into a defensive posture. And a defensive posture meant that you lost a lot less than the offensive side. However, I had already discussion with this within the group, and I think I already let it out a couple of times. The attrition of the defensive posture since the beginning of this year is way worse than it was in 2023. The Ukrainians are losing more equipment despite supposedly having better contactless means with FPVs and all this shit. We are speaking only 2024. We are not taking into account October, November, December 2023. Only 2024. 1st of January, 11th of 12th of August. Is not much worse. We're not speaking like they're gonna lose. Actually, for tanks, it's a lot worse, guys. It's like up to 40% more losses based on Oryx, of course. So the calculus, in my opinion, is like our defensive strategy is backfiring. The attrition strategy that everybody fucking vaunted at the beginning of the year is backfiring because it really relies on a logistical drive, a logistical point. And what the Russians are doing right now is sapping that logistical capacity. It doesn't mean anything that you're gonna fucking kill 10,000 Russians with FPV if the drinking water and ammunition for your troops, not FPVs, don't come because your fucking truck gets burned. Or worse, the train bringing them around gets fucking Iskandered. It's really a level difference here. We have Ukrainians fighting a company level war and the Russians fighting a fucking brigade level war. And of course, you don't see it. The only way to see it, as I said, is the Ukrainian complaints, the ground being taken over, and the strategic points getting taken away. I said Selidovo, like 5 kilometers, Vozdvizhenka to the other highway, about 4 kilometers. The road between Konstantinovka and Ugledar is cut. The road between Konstantinovka and Pokrovsk is threatened over 8 kilometers now. Those motherfuckers are closing to Pokrovsk. It was 40 something, 47 kilometers by February 2024. It's 14 kilometers right now, according to Deep State. Yeah, that's the problem. So when people organize this shit in Kursk, they are looking at the map just like me and you, and they know what's going on. And there is this, cataclysmic logic that they thought they could go as fast as possible through Kursk, grab, as I said, let's say 15-20% of the oblast, grab Kurchatov, use the huge lake as a natural barrier, have the heights behind it, so force the Russians to go into killing funnels. That never happened because the troops never made it there. And this is the fucking game now. This is game. Everybody wants to understand what it is about. It's this. It's game. The only problem is when is going the Ukrainian army, Ukrainian leadership, if this thing goes as bad as I think it's gonna go. Right now it's okay, like you can always pull back your troops and try to open another front to allow that, and then that other front is gonna also get problematic for them within 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, and you would have at least forced the Russians to start moving reserves that they should have used for Pokrovsk. But at the same time, they're still advancing. And some of the units that you pulled back from these areas that were threatened, You still went with them to Kursk. So you are overextending already war fatigued units on both sides, let's be honest, but you're on defense. And you suddenly put them on offense, which means that whatever you try to do, even if it goes the best thing ever, you are putting them in a lot more harm than defensively. And when the offense stops, your advance stops, and you get rolled back, well, you know what happens. You go towards the route. And when you go towards the route, those troops that got routed, inshallah, they don't get captured, but we have nice videos with them. They're not there anymore for Pokrovsk. So winning would have fixed these troops there. Losing would have just made these troops disappear from there. So your Pokrovsk situation doesn't change. Therefore, the whole gamble here, in my opinion, when I turn it and toss it at the current situation, of course, not what could have been, is like the Ukrainians have 2 to 3 weeks or 4 weeks to get everyone out with minimal losses, if they can, and then do what they have always tried to do, which is um, watch where the Russians are gonna, try to move troops next. And if by doing Kursk they can at least relieve the pressure in Volchansk and then kick the Russians out from that territory, it would be a success. I'm not gonna lie to you. Of course, Donetsk continues. Of course, Konstantinovsk continues, and of course, Ugledar and the push in Zaporozhye continues. But all that area there is fucked. This operation is literally Zelensky saying, "I cannot do there, so I'm going elsewhere." Therefore, if we understand the major takeaway from this offensive is that it's an exchange, yes, but not for what everybody is speaking about. I think this is more an exchange for Belgorod, that area, than for anything in Donbass or in Zaporozhye or in Kherson or elsewhere. But there are consequences to actions. And that consequence is that you just fucking invaded Russia in a certain way, producing a certain material, whipping in frenzy a lot of, I think, Russian fears. When the RDK and all these assholes did the first Belgorod, everybody was surprised. Remember the memes and so on. It took some time. Lapin had to fucking plug the holes and everything. Then the second attack in May happened. It was even a worse shit show for them. And then they did it in March for the elections. Every time it was supposed to be this uh, Russian Legion and all this bullshit. But this time, they don't hide themselves. I mean, the fucking people from Lemberg are giving interviews on how they were elated to finally go and fight the Russians on their own fucking soil. Imagine the fucking resonance of this. On both sides. On one side, you got guys from Lvov saying, "Oh, it's good. We are fighting the Russians in their home soil. That's how it should happen." A Russian reading this is like completely validated if it's like a pro-Putin side. The problem is not the Ukrainians. The problem is Lviv and Galicia. So what is he starting to think? The own goals on both sides, they write themselves. The PR attempts by both sides, especially on the Ukrainian side, are awful. I mean, the Russian Ministry of Defense said, "Oh, it's a sabotage incursion," and then themselves show footage from the 6th that sees columns of tanks breaking through the fucking border. And like, bro, what the fuck? Ukrainians don't say anything for a while, just make like these funny footages and stuff, these TikToks, and then now they come up, yeah, we are going to give a fair punishment to areas that are used as staging attacks against Ukraine. I'm like, what the fuck is even that? How Zelensky, who presented himself as a victim for 30 months, now goes on and say, oh, we are commandeering this war and we're gonna punish everyone. Like, bitch, you ain't Netanyahu, and the guys in front of you are not Palestinians. There is a huge problem of this guy. I think he's way past his due, and this operation is, in my opinion, going to do what Putin couldn't do in 2.5 years with this guy. This operation failing will take out Zelensky because his credibility to anyone is gone. You're losing Pokrovsk, you organize a shit show in Kursk, it fails and backfires, suddenly you got scenes of Western equipment being captured by the Russians, paraded even more. A couple of them are not going to move. That Leopard that got fucking hit 30 kilometers or 25 kilometers into Russia, it's there. They're going to have fun with that. Those margins that were burning on the street, they're still there. I hope they're going to evacuate them, but it's going to be very funny. That striker burning 70 kilometers within the Russian border, it's not going to be carried away. It's going to stay there. All the scenes that you're seeing right now by Lancet and shit are the reminder that Zelensky, by doing this, is condemning himself to worse conditions for the next negotiations. And on top of it, by losing it, he's going to lose a lot of credibility next to everyone else. Because even if you're the staunchest retarded Pindosian, even if you're Joe Brandon, having this man fuck up that many equipment, waste guys from units that are already fighting for at least 6 months, and I'm not exaggerating here. We have testimony that some guys who were fighting in Torezka were pulled a week before and directly thrown to Kursk. So, where do you think this guy is going to run next? Where is this guy going to pretend that everything is fine? How is this guy going to do this bravado? The only thing that remains for him is like the Americans open up the Pandora box by giving him shit like Tlam or Jasmine Air. And that's the only thing that remains. Everything else is gone. Atacams has been given. It's not changing anything. You guys can laugh about S400, S300, S whatever being destroyed. You gonna still lose New York the same. Konstantinovka is gonna be done. They finally broke through Chasov Yar in Novi and are not being pushed back. The Donbass, by doing Kursk, is literally done. And remember that a lot of people said, yes, the mobilization is going to start bearing its fruit in September. And I'm like, we are going to be in September in 20 days. Right now, you are using fit and fighting brigades to open a shit show front in Kursk. And what are you going to do with the mobilized? You're going to put them against the most fucking angry Russians in Pokrovsk, Donetsk, and Konstantinovka, Siversk? That's insanity. There is a thread over the 151, I think, made by a Timor criminal member. A whole company is gone already. Proven. Missed in action, killed, POW, wounded in, I think, 20 days. That's how attrition works. So, and these guys are defending. This is the thing. They're not on the offense. They are defending. So imagine what happens when already these newfangled brigades are there getting attrited. You get them more new formed trash. And the guys who are supposed to fight are dying because they're eating Iskander, Lancet, and other shit shows in Kursk. That's the whole point. That's game. And guys who are now applauding Ukrainians for their national suicide in Kursk are, in my opinion, certifiable. There's nothing else to say. And it's such a Pavlovian reaction to always try and boost something that has no fucking sense. Nobody's sitting and understanding how much of a problem this is. Now, for the rest, as I said, we are with a absolute nightmarish number of vehicles being used in the area. I expect the 2 next weeks to be fundamental in how the Ukrainians are going to change both their posture, but also change their direction and scope. As I said, I expect them to try and push laterally east and west, and try to get a hold of the whole higher ground, and also try to hold itself down. One of the things that I saw is that, we talk about a lot of shit, but first thing that the Ukrainians did is steal a tractor. So yeah, I mean, we are down to that point right now, that these troops just destroyed every narrative they built up for 2.5 years about Russian thieves and smart Ukrainian officers and stuff like that. So first week, I expect them to dig down in a perimeter of 5 kilometers from Suja, north, east, and west. That would be a bit problematic on some points, because we can already see that they cannot sustain the heights. They're too isolated with whatever they have. It's not Houthi kind of action yet, where the Russians are just knocking out vehicles on the high ground and then following them back for cartel style videos. But it's gonna get at that point very soon. And the other biggest problem I'm seeing for the Ukrainians is that them digging in, of course, is gonna bring up the UMP case, but them digging in would also create a problem the same way it's happening to them in Donetsk. Grinding a dug in enemy is what the Russians are doing now for 11 months, soon to be 12. I do not see the Ukrainians understanding how bad their position is. They got to understand that, but they don't. Not because they're stupid, but because, in a certain sense, you have this motto that hope dies last. So if they give up on hope, the problem they're gonna have is not that much that hope is gone and we're dead, whatever. But the problem they're gonna have is that, where do we go after this? What do we do after this? And this is the problem, to be honest. This is the major issue that I'm seeing with this war, is that the Ukrainians do not understand that it's not a movie. Remember the jokes that we're seeing a better blockbuster than the Marvel movies? Well, that's where we're going with this Ukrainian mentality, and it makes, to me, a lot of sense the way they're trying to build this up. And this buildup is extremely, I'd say, I mean, it's par for course for them. So I'm not going to try and pretend that the Ukrainians are doing something different from anyone who is sustaining a devastating war. You will have to, up to a certain sense, create at least this sense of duty, sacrifice, and so on. The problem is that with Ukrainians, everything is cringy. And unfortunately for the Russians as well, I mean, they share that thing together. But for the Ukrainians, a lot of these things are extremely cringy. And the LARP is insane. As I already said before, the problem with Ukrainian LARP is out of hand. And to a certain point, it's so out of hand that it has permeated, as I tentatively demonstrated, the use of Nazi Germany tactics from 80 years ago. So that was it. What the summary for this time is that we were more or less right at the Timor criminal last time when we said that by Friday things are going to turn. Unfortunately, I think that they should have turned a lot worse, but right now the Ukrainians avoided at least a sucking situation where, like, you go very far up and then suddenly, it backfires to you. You have this backdraft. But it doesn't solve your main issue, which is you are into a very dire logistical situation. And for you, in order to solve this logistical situation, you will have to go in such a way that whatever your benefit from this from this situation was, the calculus was, you are now struggling to extract even the minimum of it. So if the point was to capture territory, 1% of Kursk Oblast is, well, ridiculous. And 1% of Kursk Oblast also puts you in such a small polygon for the Russian army that it's just a matter of time, as I said. And it's a matter of time. Are the Russians going to risk a lot? So basically, they're going to rain UMP, they're going to artillery and dislodge you as fast as possible with the infantry and equipment, or they're going to, lancet the shit out of you for a couple of days or a couple of weeks and then finish you off with UMPKs. In my opinion, I think the UMPK decision would be the best because it's at this point basically cost free. Given that in order to fight these jets, the Ukrainians will have to bring something a lot more heavy than a Buk or a Tor or whatever, and therefore that would mean that you will have to bring some Patriots or S-300, which sooner or later going to get spotted and destroyed. So it would make a really a damaging loss for the Ukrainians to suddenly saddle up into this sustainment operation around the Kursk area with such a small salient. I mean, as I said, if they manage to hold to 1% of the Kursk Oblast, it would be already a feat, given how bad they seem to be battered or prepared in this sense. And once you are into this 1%, this speck of territory, well, sooner or later, as I said, that speck of territory is going to be irrelevant, both because the Russians are going to take over a lot more territory in Donetsk if everything goes fine and the Russians advance at 25 kilometers minimum per week. Within 4 weeks, they're 100 kilometers. And on the other side, the Ukrainian loss, this is purely mathematical, Ukrainian loss would grind them down to 100, 150. So where was the genius into this move if whatever you've gained after like 4 or 5 weeks is what the Russians just took out from you in the Donetsk Oblast that they claimed being theirs? So we have this problem, as I said, that first of all, Ukrainians seem to have completely lost their marbles. The second part is that um, it is obviously a admittance of defeat in a certain sense. As I said, if you don't go for Donetsk but you try to go on the side, it means that you are not at all gunning for Donetsk anymore because you think that you've lost it for the moment. And the third point, as I said, this has to be based in something else than what the troops, the Ukrainians dispose of, or will have in, I don't know, a couple of, let's say, weeks or months. Uh, Especially if you see, as I said, that they pulled out units from already battered units fighting Torets or fighting in Pokrovsk. This currently, I'm going to repeat myself, indicates that they are trying to do something to stop the Russians in Pokrovsk, even if it costs them down the line. The whole point is that they're expecting something somewhere, or they are trying to go full pressure because they think that the Russians are going to be tired as well. And this is the only unknown, in a certain sense, which could make sense. Like by impacting the Russian Federation, they also are showing the incompetence of some of the leadership and the lack of uh, structural protection 3 years within a war with a neighbor. That, in my opinion, is far-fetched, but it could be possible because we don't know anything real about this war. To be honest, everything that is out there, except for, of course, the strike videos and the advancement and the geolocations, the mentality on both sides is very, very scripted. We had Patrushev saying that they are not trying to negotiate; it's purely tactical, so you can have a breather, and we, of course, agree with that. But at the same time, these guys that were trying to have a breather suddenly go into a Ardennes style offensive to establish some kind of mega krinky in Russian territory, while at the same time they cannot seem to supply their own troops in Pokrovsk. It seems absolutely mind blowing, but here we are. So, as I said, guys, right now it looks like they've just lost it and they conceded to Russia, at least at first sight, the game. Uh, Temporarily, completely, it all would depend on how the Western allies going to treat this. And as I said previously, I really think that there is some kind of understanding that if shit gets out of hand, like a advancement of the Russians beyond the Donbass area, so basically a pouring into the Dnipropetrovsk area, there might be some kind of kinetic intervention from the Americans or whoever. But once again, it would be, first of all, stupid, and second of all, would be the actual Pandora box open, and the consequences of that. Right now, we have no idea because so far people have really mocked Putin by saying that all his red lines went through the roof. But every time that one of his red lines has been um, bypassed or simply shredded, the situation for the Ukrainian army, military, and country has worsened. I know that people are going to say, this is bullshit. It's not. It's the truth. It's absolutely the truth. And the trend for Ukraine is a painful but limited loss. With Kursk, we might go to a painful but a far more extensive loss, be that on the table of negotiations or on the ground. As I said, if Kursk backfires and you deplete the very same core units you were supposed to use as some kind of counterattack or at least to be reinforced by greenhorns, then you risk maybe not a collapse, but a profound threat to your front line in Donetsk. And you might even have a domino effect when Russians finally break through Konstantinovka by October, November, uh, Ukrainians panic, pull out, and the Russians are stopped only in Druzhkovka. And then they have done halfway in northern Donbass. Then what are you going to do with that? By doing that, they're also going to completely isolate Seversk, and you're going to have an actual real collapse in the front. Same for Pokrovsk. You cut the Pokrovsk-Konstantinovka road for good, and you cut the Saridovo road as well. Suddenly, Pokrovsk itself is a dead end for Ukraine. What are you going to do? Are you still going to defend that? So the major risk for Ukraine with this operation is that if it really turns bad, it's going to turn even worse within the end of the year. And then all that thing that you wanted to avoid through not mobilizing people too fast, are you are going to regret it, and you'll be forced to actually push even more people that you actually needed initially. And it's going to be March 2022 again, when it's true, the meat waves did their thing, but in this case, you're going to have to send the meat waves not directly at the front, as was back in the day with Kiev, but 400 kilometers from where you actually are pulling them from, with all the threats and the dangers of that journey. That by the time that enough troops have arrived, I don't know, around Pokrovsk, the city is gone. Maybe not completely captured, but you have a Suja situation, and you're not losing a city of 5,000, but almost 20 times that. So, guys, that was it. Basically, now it's time for you, if you want to ask questions or whatever, intervene. It's up to you. I'm really sorry for a couple of interruptions that we had. I don't know what's going on with X, and I would like to apologize for that. I would also like to apologize for the swearing. I know that it has been pointed out by a couple of people. I will, from now on, I will also try to make it a lot more succinct, so a lot less of expansion on discussing choices for other people. I'm just gonna put out what I think, and that's it. And one of the things I wanted to do is that these two spaces were made possible by uh, the team itself, but I never single out people. But in this case, I will do it by Sura, that started to map internally the points. Ghost of Omsk, dude, you're great, don't change. And Trapped, in a sense, for a couple of other things. And then, of course, the whole group has been like pouring information. We've have had this discussion about how, where, and who. And it looks honestly very, very bleak for us all. We don't understand the point. And I'm not going to make that mistake that a lot of people have made when I've pointed out things on the Russian side, things that I don't understand are stupid. No, we just don't understand. We don't see the point. We from what we're seeing, it's extremely dubious. We don't know who is behind this, and we really think that it's some kind of gambit pushed to Zelensky by Gur people. So basically, we see the hand of Budaniger behind it, because the whole maneuver reeks like him. Like, if you want to see what this thing's gonna look like in 3-4 weeks, if nothing changes, look no far than the two attempts in Tenderovska Spit and in Kinburn Spit. So yeah, thank you guys for that. I rarely single out people, but in this case, I'm gonna do it because those were absolutely the cornerstones of this one. And once again, the whole team War Criminal is fostering these spaces. And for once, I need to admit that a lot of people were thinking about this in these terms. I think, just like the Russian military, I didn't believe that Ukrainians were going to be this stupid, and that's a big mistake, guys. because you know what people say: professionals are predictable, but you need to beware of the amateurs, for they have no clue what they're doing. Thank you very much. It's up to you guys. You can lay out whatever, even if you want to criticize, especially if you want to criticize. I'm open to everything. Up to you guys. Go on, Kremlin.
Hey guys. Yeah, me again, asking dumb questions. I was just thinking about this. Like, do you think that initially, at least in the Ukraine mind, they thought that, well, we're gonna go in, we're gonna storm them. If there's any air defense there, like long range air defense, we're gonna hit them at a closer range with HIMARS, right? Eventually even those hits on those airfields, and hopefully then they can use the quote unquote new aviation that they got. Like, do you guys think that there was somewhere along their thought train this was something that was kind of happening? And basically the idea is to push long range defense on the Russian side on that part as far as possible, right, via ground, so that their planes don't get fucking wiped as soon as they get close to the border.
That would have been extremely stupid. Not to be lying to you. For one main reason is that their books were 20 kilometers from the border. So the books were there honestly to defend against helicopters. That's what they did. I'm pretty sure that the only cam of 52 apparently M that was lost was hit by a book. And of course, book got its retribution for that. But I really think that it's not the F-16s. Why? Because in order for the F-16s to go to the border or nearer to the border, they would have to really fly well within Ukraine. And anywhere in middle Ukraine, you're going to be visible for the Russians. And anywhere in the middle Ukraine, you're going to eat a Iskander missile. And going there to loiter 2 to 3 minutes, possibly to lob long range smart ammunition, SDBs or whatever. Yeah, why not? But the problem is that then what? You need to fly back at the other end of Ukraine, which means that the next F-16 to cover you is again going to fly the same way and go back. The carousel that you need to do that would expose the F-16 so hard because you need to be on clock that one of those is going to get lost by a Nilly Willy R-37M sent from within the Russian border. The Russians can fire from over Kursk and still hit 100 kilometers within the Ukrainian border, which is where the F-16 should be if it has to launch a harm or stuff like that. So I do not believe, given the logistics of that operation, and given the fact that on that Kursk area, the intelligence on the Russian side wasn't bad. It's just this is one of the things that we have with the Russians, like systematically. They just ignored it because they thought, I think, like me, these guys are never going to do this shit. This is insane. And I think, in a certain sense, is how the Allies saw the Germans in the Ardennes. Like, this is bullshit. And a lot of people are, like, as I say often, they are going with the putative effect that this attack would have had on Russia. Like, they're gonna do 70 kilometers, 80 kilometers to Kurchatov. I'm like, guys, by that time frame, they're lost. They're done. It's over. If they're gonna drive 85 kilometers, half of their fucking shitty BTRs is gonna break down. Let alone if they get lost and they stumble upon some Russian territorial defense. There's a video apparently of one of the BTR forces getting fired upon. Um, you would go and repeat the same mistake the Russians did in 2022. This is what makes me the most like incredulous when it comes to that. You have the same shit the Russians did, and they ended up abandoning shit 100 kilometers from the starting point because of lack of gas, because of harassment, because of lack of communication, because the follow up didn't make it. So I cannot believe the Ukrainians thought that they would operate better than the Russians with a fraction of the equipment the Russians tried to put on. And of course, I understand why they thought that, because they were using Western equipment mostly, at least for the first phase. But come on, like just think about it. And
No, so sorry for cutting you. No, I'm just saying that, like, I remember you being like a little bit angry about, seeing the martyrs and how basically the Germans kind of like uh, bent the knee and like, okay, you can use whatever you want, any equipment. So basically, one other thing that I keep telling people is that, like, not whenever Ukraine does something, it's not like the Americans don't know. They always know. Like, it's very rare that, let's say, maybe the Americans don't explicitly say, okay, do this, or they actually not only encourage them but like help them out in the planning, right? And the way I see this is every time we see a new piece of equipment coming or whatever game, quote unquote, game changer, there's usually like a plan behind it. It's not like a willy nilly, oh, we're going to send them finally this or that. Like, it's basically the blueprint has been set. However stupid it may be, keep in mind, I'm not saying it's going to be a success. It's basically what they think is going to be a success, but they already have the plan and now they just want to execute it, right? And it's kind of like you already ordered the stew, right? And now they're just bringing you the fork. Sorry, the not the fork, the spoon. You get what I mean?
yes, I get it, but like that's why I'm saying, if that's the plan, if there is this mega plan, then let's go back to how they cooked for the Ukrainians for the counter. And I said the Orbat created for the counter was trash. The area chosen for the counter was trash. The absence of preparation against the Russians, except a couple of skirmishes in March and then in May, was trash. The conflict with Prigozhin that started over, of course, its own benefit wasn't exploited at all. Like, it's true that Prigozhin caused the first Russian air losses of the counter, and the counter was going for 20 days. But in this case, I do not believe the Americans gave the green light for this shit show. If there was a plan, then the Ukrainians sold them something that is not on the menu. It's like me showing you a Fiat garage and saying, I'm going to give you an Alpha 6C without telling you that Alpha 6C is a fucking prototype from 7 years ago and I will never going to be make a second one. What I'm going to give you is probably a Fiat 500 electric with uh, a convertible one. And I'm going to put there Alpha 6C. Enjoy it, motherfucker. This is the problem. This is why I'm going to repeat to people. I do not believe the Americans were that stupid to say, go for it, bro. Unless, of course, they said if shit goes high wire, then we're going to intervene. If it's not like that, then we are weeks away from a catastrophe in Europe. But I just do not believe that, because there is nothing being taken as action against the Russians in Pokrovsk. And I know that a lot of people are going to say, yeah, but it's going to be another month and then they're going to fucking wear themselves out. Yes, both sides. That's the problem. both sides are going to be in such a fucking pitiful state around that axis that the Russians will not even need to destroy them. And when it comes to game changers, except for the HIMARS, which has been greatly deteriorated, nothing else is there. Um, First was Javelin, Javelin was keyhole, we had the Bayraktar, Bayraktar got killed within a month, and even today, the Turks don't want to deliver anymore to Ukraine. There is supposed to be a fucking assembly line built there, but there is complete radio silence of that. There is the rumor that, in fact, that place is currently making lutes instead of Bayraktars because Bayraktars are, well, not that effective, let's say it like this. But then what? After that was the 777 Lotto Bingo. Then it's true that HIMARS contribute largely to the Izium and Kherson area. And then what? Everything went high wire with the counter. Everything that was working so perfectly in 2002 just went absolutely into a shit show in 2023. So far so that not only we have a lot of losses when it comes to 777, which is a large part of the park. For the Russians, the whole park has been gone, and the Americans have delivered new ones without saying. But the major causes of the Ukrainian advance in 2022 have been attributed to a point that I personally think that this bodes pretty badly for any artillery, Western artillery. Not that much because the artilleries are bad, but simply because they don't have the numbers and they don't understand how to use them. You're not gonna tell me that Ukrainians are completely misusing shit like the Paladin and stuff. It's just that the other side has eyes and has the means to hit you. Now, the other problem with the game changers is that, okay, let's say there is a plan for the F-16 to come close to Kursk and all this shit. But you don't need the F-16 in Kursk. What you need is the F-16 in Donetsk or in Zaporozhye. You don't need it in Kursk. This is the problem. This is the problem. It's all these theories around Kursk is that in Kursk you are going towards a far more problematic air defense and also far more problematic air offense on the Russian side. Your F-16 will not have any cover. If the cover is in Sumy, it will have to be on a hill because Sumy is in a valley. They're going to cover maybe 120 kilometers within the area, which is 90 kilometers towards the Russian Federation. It's not long enough. If your fucking F-16 with its shitty AIM 120B or AIM 120C is going to fly there, uh, its reach is going to be about 80 to 100 kilometers, whereas the Russian jets coming towards you can outshoot you of at least 50 to 70 kilometers. And they don't need to come close to the Patriot either. So operating over Kursk or operating over the fucking Russian border is a suicide mission for the F-16. For actually any plane, it doesn't matter. The logic of trying to find some plan behind everything is nice, and honestly, you have to ask yourself why are they doing it? They're not stupid, or maybe they are, but not at that point. But in this case, I just don't think so because otherwise, the air coverage on the Ukrainian side would have been absolutely day and night with what we're seeing right now. The Ukrainians are getting creamed by the fact that they do not control the air. They have lost, as I said, more tanks in the area during the week than the whole front on tape, of course. In reality, they could have lost like 10,000 tanks. We haven't seen that, but on tape, you got 8 by now in Kursk area, and about 5 for the rest of the front. And once again, I'm going to repeat it. This is not good. Because your whole point when you're Ukraine is that those assets, artillery and tanks, are fragile, are precious. You don't have them anymore. Nobody's gonna drop you another 200-300 T-72s. You will have to, and that's the funny thing. make a coup in Venezuela and grab their T-72s, or find them into, I don't know, in some shit place, or India went completely delulu and sells its T-72 AVs. So in that aspect, I do not think it's that simple, or at least I do not see the linkage right away. What I see though is that um, the plan for Kursk was to put them in the same envelope as uh, Belgorod, which means allow Atacam strikes within the oblast. That's true, and we already have one HIMARS strike in the vicinity of Rilsk, which was replicated with a Iskander strike into Konstantinovka. And well, that's the counter value of this war. Ukrainians think that they can do some things without retribution. That's not the case. And we had about 12, according to Ukrainians themselves, 12 of them wiped out by UMPK. So I completely agree with you. We need to think deeper with this operation because, like, the first layer seems so brutally stupid that there has to be something else. And this may make a lot of people think that, oh, maybe it's true and the Russians do not have any reserves and stuff like that. I'm like, maybe, but it still doesn't make sense for the Ukrainians to cremate themselves in Kursk if the goal is to deprive Pokrovsk from reserves. So yeah, sorry if it was a bit longish. It's up to you, man. If anyone else wants to intervene, fire up, guys.
Yeah, until anybody else decides, I have like two more short questions. Like one of them would be regarding what the fuck? Wait, I have a brain fart. God damn it! Just give me a minute. Just give me a minute.
No
Sorry.
problem. So, guys, I don't know if you saw already, but there's apparently a BTR-4 getting ambushed, as I said. There are videos circulating. Ah, I mean, more fun for people who said that the Russian civilians weren't fighting. Some guys are going to be very, very, very happy, but I don't think that they're going to be happy for the same reasons as they thought initially. Um, I also going to announce something quickie. Probably on Thursday, I'm doing a recap space on the Pokrovsk and New York axis because one of the things that Ghost of Omsk pointed out, and it's true, is that we have started to make the mistake of believing a lot of maps from the other side. So locations are nice, it's true, but I'm using a lot of the Cope State maps to, of course, troll the Ukrainians, but at the same time, as Ghost of Omsk pointed out, maybe we should start waiting for actual confirmation. It usually comes, like Creamy has the confirmation from Deep State within 2 or 3 days. But the reality, as I spoke already, is that in many cases, Deep State is giving it right away. Actually, things that have already been happening. Um, it's true that we should always be vigilant, and that's why I'm gonna maybe review all the things and point out what I think is true or not with a Cope State map. And because there are areas that Cope State, for instance, still marks as contested or under Ukrainian control, but that we've seen Russian literally take over, especially with geolocations from Crimea or Ghost of Omsk or other people. So in that aspect, I'm just trying to like point out that we will have a frontline settling in order for everyone to understand where the reality lays. And just going to tell you right away, guys, it's a lot worse for Ukrainians that we think, even by being conservative. If things do not change this month for Pokrovsk area, it might very well be possible that cities like Selidovo would be under direct Russian attack. And one of the things that we've seen often is that um, Russian attacks on cities have been going mostly one way. It has taken time or no time, but it has mostly gone one way. Yeah, go on, Kremlin.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I just remembered. So, like, two things. One of them is kind of like a guesstimation, and like, what do you guys think? Like, this shit show in Kursk is going to end on the Ukrainian side. I mean, obviously, we discussed that there's that little forest in Sumy, which can always be used to, basically hide a lot of troops, a lot of equipment over there. But obviously, by mid-October, uh, nature comes into play. All trees are going to shed their leaves and such. So. You can't hide there anymore. So I'm guessing mid October the latest, right? And second
Mhm.
question is regarding equipment. Like we haven't actually seen, besides some like small little announcements here and there, especially on the United States side. We haven't seen, last year at least, they would put out these bulletins. We have just sent another aid, military aid package to Ukraine, which includes this and this. Initially, they would have numbers, after which they removed the numbers, right, for various reasons, either because they couldn't send enough or whatnot. But right now, we're not getting those. But I still think a lot of equipment that Ukraine is losing, that where they still can kind of like have enough to replace it. My guess is that it's still being sent. It's not just it's just not being announced, right? Because like we've seen, if I'm not mistaken, we've seen some images of what is it, the Polish PT-90. It's basically their upgraded T-72, right? We've seen footage of that, if I'm not mistaken, destroyed in this whole Kursk thing. Um, so the second question would be like, what do you guys think? Like, are we at that stage where basically they're not, basically they gave up on saying what they're delivering and they're just kind of like replacing whatever as much as possible?
Well, the problem is the following: the PT-91 um, front, quote unquote, is relatively stable. We know that for sure 40 have been sent out of 60 that were hinted or pledged or whatever you want to call it. Out of those 40, nine are gone. Two more were damaged, but probably repaired. So you are into a 25% kind of territory lost on the PT. As for the T-72s, about 490 have been sent if you separate the PT-91, although it's the same tank more or less. But so 490 have been sent, about 150 from those sent, no, 145 from those sent as have been destroyed or lost in a way or another. So therefore, as well, you are into this logic of roughly 25 to 30% of what was sent has been visibly seen as lost. Um, the absence of sustained operations in larger numbers with vehicles like the um, Bradley, when you compare that with the column that we saw in Kursk for Marders, is exactly what I'm saying. The Bradleys now, when they go into a defensive stance, are used roughly in tandem, when one in cover and the other in movement and so on. The one time they sent them in a flock to try and push back the Russians was around the Avdiivka uh, Terikon, and they lost the whole fucking crew. And in that area, they lost first four, then seven, then 11, then 14, and then there were shitty Bradleys all over the place. So far, so that the Russians literally, some of them didn't even pick them up to send it to Kubinka. But I agree that a lot of transfers now are hushed. One of the things is that, for instance, the Ukrainians are supposed to have 67 uh, Caesars delivered, of which probably about 10 are definitely lost. And the hint from the French press was like about 40% of every barrel, uh, every system in this case, was unavailable at any given time due to, well, you guessed it, amortization. And we had the same thing with the Brits, that they had to resend AS-90 guns, barrels actually, plus new systems. And we had the same with the Germans, who ordered 22 new barrels for the Panzer Haubitze. 2000. So attrition is there. Those 22 barrels literally do not mean that the systems are gone. It's just that in order to replace or to sustain those systems, you need new barrels. Attrition is there, and the supplies, however you want to turn it around, are not enough. Especially for the kind of army that Ukraine is supposed to have. If you pull together every single mean on the maneuver side, you should end up with maybe 6 to 7 thousand systems, of which a huge part is trucks like Humvees, MRAPs, and IVs. Tanks, maybe 800, maybe 500. As I said, when you analyze what the Indians sold them, 50,000 high explosive rounds, you get to a sustainment supply for roughly 500 tanks in 125 millimeter caliber, and which would be perfectly in line with what they've lost, what they've received, and what they can really operate. And as we saw with the attack on the tank prom in Kharkov, a boatload of tanks are actually in repair. I think that there were like 47 in the yard. Some of them cannibalized, some of them in repair, plus the ones that were inside. So you can see that if this sustainment issue keeps going, the main problem for Ukrainians is the equipment. First, they do not have enough for a major offensive army, and second, it's not that they don't have enough, but the wear and tear in war is not the same as in like peacetime, uh, which basically means that we are looking to a skeleton of army that Ukrainians have now, with a lot of meat around it, but this meat cannot follow the skeleton of an army. This meat cannot fight effectively, efficiently, with the way that the Ukrainian army is being handled since the beginning of 2024. My scare is that, given, as I said, how hodgepodge the troops are for the operation in Kursk, is that by losing, in a way or another, all these troops and all that equipment for this operation in Kursk, they're going to handicap themselves regarding these units that they picked from other fronts, to a point that at the end, it will not matter that much that Ukraine gets, I don't know, 100, 200 to 300 more shit boxes. What would matter is that they're going to come to a point when Ukraine would need, pens to sign capitulation or start negotiations, stuff like that. Not that much guns and ammo. This is my biggest actually scare, is that this starts a domino effect where Ukrainians finally realize they're fucked, and they speed the end of this at this first phase of the war in order for them to have a breather and stop the Russians on their tracks by these negotiations, while the Russians are about to, have a good bite on Dnipropetrovsk or Kharkov. And this is my scare. My scare is that this is a bit akin to Operation Magistral in Afghanistan, where the Russians, did a one last outing, cleared a lot of trash, and then they say bye. This is my scare right now, is that we're seeing the last throes of the first phase of the war, and it is coming because Ukrainians just are out of breath. And unfortunately, I have this feeling that the Russians are going to allow them, and they're going to beat them a little bit on the side, but they're not going to inflict the defeat that they can for the next 6 months. And one of the things that I'm having a problem with is also that Ukraine itself is delusional right now. Like, everybody's happy when there's a strike on Morozovsk or in Lipetsk. But for fuck's sake, you got rolling blackouts now for 3 months, and it's fine. It's summer. It's just you not being able to shower, and the fridge doesn't work all the time. But in the winter, think about that. And we go back to exactly what I said. Russia needs to have now dual targets and look at this war from a strictly cost efficient perspective. Is taking out civilians cost efficient? Yes, do it. Israelis are doing it, don't have a fucking problem with it. And they're still being defended by the US. So at this point, the Russia has a jurisprudence laid out. I know it's awful. I know that a lot of people are may be disgusted by what I'm saying, but this is the war Ukraine chose. Russia as well, by the way. And people are going to say, oh, there is not a choice when you're being forced to. Yes, there is a choice. Rules exist for people who abide by them, and if there are people who enforce them, there is no enforcement in international relationships for now 22 and a half years. Since September 2001, soon to be 23 years. International law doesn't work. You had some guy, because there was a terrorist attack, who went across the globe, attacked two other countries on spurious logic and on false premises, ruined a whole area of this fucking planet, and that's it. That guy gets to go and see college football and all this bullshit in Texas. So at that point, why the fuck would you even try to abide by international law? Unless there are sanctions, of course, unless you have people that are opposing you. But that's the thing. Nobody's enforcing anything, so why should you even care if that you just wasted 60,000 civilians? The Israelis don't care. America doesn't care. And don't give me the, oh, Joe Biden was pissed with Netanyahu. If he was pissed, they would have cut the aid right away. No more ammo right away. So at this point, there are very little things that the Russians can do that would be wrong in this military process. The only thing that should be done right now is just focus on making sure that the Ukrainians pay the price for Kursk, keep going in Donetsk, and all the rest after that is going to fall down all the same. Not because there is some smarties or there is no, just because of the raw mass, the critical mass of the Russian forces against Ukraine. And the only way to stop that, we're going back to what I said very early in this war, I think 2 months after it started, is going to be Western intervention. And maybe it's going to happen. Who knows? But without that, the Ukrainians are going to have a huge fucking problem if nothing changes. Thank you very much, guys. Have a nice day. I know it was a bit convoluted, but it is what it is. Bye, guys.